An alien princess rejected him for his bloodline, but he won her first night by right. The crystalline spires of Zephyria Prime pierced the amber sky like frozen lightning, their surfaces reflecting the twin suns that bathed the alien capital in perpetual golden twilight. Within the grand diplomatic hall, tension crackled through the air, as thick as the exotic incense burning in obsidian braziers. Captain Marcus Chen stood at attention before the ethereal council, his human, military uniform a stark contrast to the flowing, luminescent robes of the alien dignitaries. His dark eyes remained steady despite the weight of a dozen alien gazes upon him, some curious, others openly disdainful. At the center of the curved tribunal sat Princess Lirelei Vex Thara, her alabaster skin seeming to glow from within, marked by intricate silver patterns that shifted like living tattoos across her high cheekbones. Her hair, a cascade of midnight blue that seemed to hold captured starlight, framed features of impossible beauty. Yet her expression was carved from ice as she regarded the human before her. The Terran delegation proposes this union, she spoke, her voice carrying the musical quality of her people, though each word dripped with barely concealed disgust. They offer their military commander as my consort to seal our alliance. Elder Thanaros, his ancient features marked by centuries of wisdom, leaned forward. Princess, the strategic value cannot be denied. The human fleets are commanded by one whose blood carries no honor, no legacy, no divine spark, Lirelei interrupted, rising gracefully from her throne. At nearly 7 feet tall, she towered over most beings, her presence commanding absolute attention. The Vex Thara bloodline has ruled for 10,000 years. We are descendants of the Star Weavers themselves, and you would have me bind myself to do this. Marcus felt the familiar sting of prejudice, but his expression never wavered. He had faced worse odds in the asteroid fields of Proxima, had led the charge against the Void Raiders when all seemed lost. A spoiled princess's disdain was nothing compared to the burning hulls of starships and the screams of dying worlds. "Your Highness," he said, his voice calm and respectful despite the insult, "I understand your concerns about bloodline and tradition, but perhaps strength of character matters more than the circumstances of one's birth." A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. No one spoke to the princess with such directness. Lyralei's violet eyes flashed dangerously. "Character? You dare speak of character while standing in these hallowed halls, seeking to elevate yourself through political convenience? You know nothing of our ways, nothing of the sacred bonds that have kept our empire strong for millennia. I know that your people are dying," Marcus replied quietly, causing another ripple of shock through the assembly. "The Devourer fleet approaches your outer colonies. Your proud bloodlines and ancient traditions won't stop plasma cannons or quantum torpedoes, but my ships can." The princess descended the steps slowly, each movement fluid and predatory. "Even if your primitive vessels could aid us, which I doubt, the very thought of joining my essence to yours revolts me. You are not merely beneath my station, you are beneath consideration entirely." Marcus met her gaze steadily as she came to stand. Before him, her presence both magnificent and terrible. "Then invoke the Crimson Trials," he said simply. The hall fell into absolute silence. Even the soft hum of the energy barriers seemed to pause. Elder Thanaros spoke first, his voice barely a whisper. "Captain Chen, surely you don't understand." "What you're asking, I understand perfectly," Marcus interrupted, never breaking eye contact with the princess. "By the ancient laws of your people, any being, regardless of birth or station, may challenge for the right to court royalty through trial by combat, trial by wisdom, and trial by sacrifice. I invoke that right." Lyralei's perfect features contorted, with a mixture of fury and shock. The Crimson Trials hadn't been invoked in over 3 centuries, but once spoken, the words could not be taken back. The arena of eternal storms stood like a colossal amphitheater carved from living rock, its walls pulsing with veins of energy that had witnessed countless battles over the millennia. Storm. Clouds perpetually swirled overhead, contained by an ancient force field that turned the sky into a dome of churning tempest. Lightning arced across the arena floor in random patterns, creating a deadly obstacle course that would test even the most skilled warrior. Princess Lyrelei sat in the royal viewing platform, her fingers gripping the armrests of her throne so tightly that her knuckles had turned white beneath her luminescent skin. She wore ceremonial armor that seemed forged from liquid moonlight, its surface reflecting the chaotic light show below. Her violet eyes were fixed on the human who had dared invoke the most sacred challenge of her people. "This is madness," whispered Councillor Vera Lynn, her own blue-tinged features pale with worry. "No outsider has ever attempted the Crimson Trials. The shame alone if he dies." "When he dies," Lyrelei corrected coldly, though something flickered in her expression that might have been uncertainty. "The trials were designed to test those born to our warrior caste, those whose very blood carries the resonance of our ancestors. This human will be torn apart by the first lightning strike." Below in the arena, Marcus stood at the center of the storm-lashed floor, his borrowed ceremonial armor a deep crimson that seemed to absorb the chaotic light around him. The armor had been crafted for a Zephyrian warrior, its bioadaptive systems struggling to accommodate his alien physiology. But it held. His opponent materialized from the swirling energy, not another being, but a manifestation of the arena itself. The storm wraith towered 12 feet tall, its form composed of crackling electricity and condensed plasma, with eyes like miniature suns that burned with ancient malevolence. First trial. Strength of arms. The arena's voice boomed, seeming to come from the very stones themselves. The challenger must defeat the guardian of the storm to prove his worthiness to court royalty. The wraith attacked without warning, its arm extending into a whip of pure energy that lashed across the arena floor, leaving a molten scar in the rock. Marcus rolled aside, his human reflexes barely keeping him ahead of the creature's impossible speed. "Too slow," Lyrelei muttered, leaning forward despite herself. The wraith moves faster than thought itself, but Marcus wasn't trying to match the creature's speed. Instead, he was studying its patterns, the way energy flowed through its form, the microsecond delays between its attacks. Years of space combat had taught him that every enemy, no matter how alien, had weaknesses. The wraith's next attack came as a barrage of lightning bolts, each one capable of vaporizing a normal being. Marcus didn't dodge. Instead, he angled his armor's reflective surfaces, using the ancient Zephyrian technology against their own guardian. The bolts ricocheted in carefully calculated directions, several striking the creature's core simultaneously. 4. The first time in centuries, the storm wraith staggered. "Impossible," breathed Elder Thaneros from his seat beside the princess. "He's using our own arena against the guardian." Marcus pressed his advantage, not with brute force but with strategy. He herded the wraith toward the arena's edge, where the containment field created a resonance point. With precise timing born from countless space battles, he triggered an overload in the creature's energy matrix. The wraith collapsed into dissipating. Sparks, its ancient fury finally spent. Silence filled the arena, broken only by the distant rumble of the perpetual storm above. Then slowly, the assembled crowd began to murmur in grudging appreciation. Lyrelei found herself standing without realizing it, her heart racing with something she couldn't quite identify. This human, this supposedly inferior being, had just accomplished what many of her own warriors had failed to do. Marcus looked up at her, his armor smoking and his face streaked with sweat, but his eyes still held that same quiet determination that had infuriated and somehow intrigued her. One trial, Down. 2 to go. The chamber of infinite mirrors existed in a space between dimensions, its walls reflecting not just images but possibilities, memories, and the deepest truths of those who entered. The crystalline floor beneath Marcus's feet seemed to extend infinitely downward, creating the unsettling sensation of walking on air above an endless void. Each mirror surface showed a different version of reality, some displaying his past, others potential futures, and still others showing truths he had never acknowledged even to himself. Princess Lyrelei stood at the chamber's heart, no longer wearing armor but robed in flowing fabric that seemed woven from captured aurora light. Her expression was unreadable as she watched Marcus navigate the maze of reflections, but her hands trembled slightly at her sides. The second trial. "Wisdom of the heart," announced the chamber's ethereal voice, seeming to emanate from the mirrors themselves. The challenger must face the truth of his own soul and speak the deepest wisdom of his spirit. Only then may he prove worthy to understand the heart of royalty. The mirrors began to shift and change, showing Marcus scenes from his life, his childhood on Mars Colony, where he had been the son of maintenance workers, while the children of corporate executives looked down on him with the same disdain he now faced from alien royalty. His first command, where he had lost half his crew to his own inexperience. The moment he had volunteered for the diplomatic mission to Zephyria, knowing it might be a one-way journey. "Look deeper," commanded the chamber. "What drives you to seek what you cannot have?" Marcus paused before a mirror that showed him standing before Lyrelei's throne, but in the reflection, he saw something different in his own eyes. Not determination, but desperation. The truth hit him like a physical blow. "I see a man who has always felt he wasn't enough," he said quietly, his voice carrying clearly in the crystal space. "Someone who has spent his entire life trying to prove his worth to people who had already decided he had none." Lyrelei's breath caught as she heard the raw honesty in his words. In the mirrors around her, she began to see reflections of her own life. The weight of expectations, the loneliness of a crown that separated her from any genuine connection, the way she had learned to use cruelty as a shield against vulnerability. "And what of your desire for the princess?" the chamber pressed. "Speak truly, or the mirrors will shatter and your trial will end in failure." Marcus turned to face Lyrelei directly, ignoring the disorienting effects of the dimensional space. "At first, I saw her as a prize to be won, a way to prove that a human could rise to any height, but that was before I truly looked at her." He stepped closer, the mirrors around them showing increasingly intimate reflections, moments of doubt, fear, and longing that neither had ever shared with another soul. "I see someone who has been told her entire life that her worth comes from her bloodline, not her choices. Someone who has never been allowed to be anything other than perfect, and who has learned to hate anyone who might see her as anything less than the untouchable goddess they've made her into." Lyrelei's eyes widened as the mirrors around her began showing her own deepest fears, the terror of being truly known, the ache of loneliness that came with absolute power, the way she pushed away anyone who might matter to her before they could. "Reject her first." "You're wrong," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Marcus asked gently. "Because I recognize that loneliness. I've carried it my entire life. The difference is, I learned to fight against it instead of letting it make me cruel." The mirrors suddenly stilled, showing only their true reflections, two beings from different worlds, both shaped by isolation and the need to prove themselves worthy of love they had never believed they deserved. "The truth has been spoken," declared the chamber. "The trial of wisdom is complete." As the dimensional space began to fade around them, Lyrelei found herself truly seeing Marcus for the first time, not as a presumptuous human, but as someone who understood the weight she carried, The altar of sacred bonds stood atop the highest spire of the royal palace, open to the star-filled sky where the three moons of Zephyria cast their silver light upon the ancient stone. The altar itself was carved from a single piece of star metal, its surface inscribed with binding runes that pulsed with soft luminescence. This was where the final trial would take place, the trial of sacrifice, where the challenger must give up something precious to prove their worthiness. Lyreli arrived first, her ceremonial gown trailing behind her like liquid starlight. She had barely spoken since the Chamber of Mirrors, the revelations there having shaken the foundations of everything she thought she knew about herself and the human who dared to challenge for her hand. Marcus appeared moments later, no longer wearing borrowed Zephyrian armor, but the simple dress uniform of the Terran fleet. He had made his choice about what to sacrifice, and it showed in the solemn set of his shoulders. "The final trial, sacrifice of the spirit," announced Elder Thaneros, who served as the ceremony's witness. "The challenger must offer up that which he values most, proving his commitment transcends personal desire." The assembled court watched in hushed anticipation. Previous challengers had offered wealth, power, even their own lives in spectacular displays of devotion. What could a human possibly sacrifice that would prove worthy of their princess? Marcus stepped forward and placed his hands upon the altar. "I offer my greatest achievement, my most treasured possession, my command of the Terran fleet." Gasps echoed through the gathering. The princess herself stepped back in shock. "You cannot," she whispered. "Your fleet is the only thing keeping the Devourer Armada from our borders. Without your command, both our peoples will fall." "Exactly," Marcus said quietly, meeting her eyes. "I'm willing to give up the one thing that makes me valuable to you, the only reason you might consider accepting me. I sacrifice my strategic worth to prove that my feelings aren't based on political gain or personal advancement." The altar began to glow brighter as it recognized the sincerity of his offering. To give up command meant returning to Earth in disgrace, branded as the captain who abandoned his post for alien love. It meant his people would face the Devourer fleet without their most experienced commander. "But why?" Lyreli asked, her voice breaking. "Why would you damn both our peoples for—" "Because love without choice isn't love at all," Marcus interrupted. "If you accept me only because you need my fleet, then I've won nothing but a political arrangement. I want you to choose me knowing that I come with nothing but myself to offer." The altar's light reached a crescendo, and suddenly the binding runes flared to life. The trial of sacrifice was complete, and by the ancient laws of Zephyria, Marcus had won the right to claim his prize. "By the sacred traditions of our people," Elder Thaneros announced, his voice carrying across the spire, "Captain Marcus Chen has completed the Crimson Trials. The right of First Night is his to claim." The gathered court fell silent, all eyes turning to the princess. By law, she could not refuse. The trials had been witnessed, the sacrifice accepted. Yet as she looked into Marcus's eyes, she saw something that changed everything. He wasn't going to claim his right by force or law. He was waiting for her to choose. "The trials are complete," she said slowly, her voice growing stronger with each word. "And I—" She paused, looking out over her assembled court, then back to the human who had proven himself worthy in ways she had never expected. "I choose to honor them willingly." She stepped forward and placed her hands over his on the altar. "Not because I must, but because I want to understand what it means to be chosen for myself alone." The moon's light seemed to intensify around them as the ancient binding began, sealing not just a political alliance, but the beginning of something neither had expected to find. The private chambers of the princess had been transformed for the traditional first night ceremony, though neither Marcus nor Lorelei paid much attention to the elaborate decorations of bioluminescent flowers and floating crystal orbs that cast dancing patterns of light across the walls. They stood near the vast window that looked out over the capital city, the silence between them heavy with unspoken possibilities and the weight of what had just transpired. "You realize what you've done?" Lyrali said softly, her back turned to him as she gazed at the star-studded sky. "Without your fleet command, the War Council will assign someone else to lead the defense. Someone who doesn't understand our tactics, our weaknesses." "Admiral Harrison is a good officer," Marcus replied, though his voice carried the weight of uncertainty. "He'll adapt." "Will he?" She turned to face him, her expression a mixture of vulnerability and something else, something that might have been the beginning of respect. "You've gambled both our civilizations on the belief that I might be worth more than political necessity." Marcus approached slowly, careful not to crowd her. "I've gambled on the belief that some things are worth risking everything for, that there's a difference between claiming someone and earning their trust. The traditional ceremonies called for immediate consummation, the binding of their union under the light of the 3 moons. But both of them understood that what was happening here transcended ritual and law. "I've spent my entire life being told I was untouchable," Lorelei whispered, her luminescent skin seeming to glow brighter in the moonlight. "Sacred, perfect. Do you know what it's like to be worshipped by people who are terrified to actually know you?" "I know what it's like to be dismissed by people who refuse to see who you really are," Marcus answered. "Maybe that's why I can look at you and see past the crown and the bloodline." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What do you see then? What could a human possibly see in an alien princess that her own people cannot?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "I see someone who uses cruelty as a shield because kindness has always been seen as weakness, someone who has never been allowed to fail, to learn, to grow, someone who is desperately tired of being perfect." Tears began to flow down her cheeks. The first time in decades she had allowed herself such vulnerability. "The night you invoked the trials, I wanted you to fail. I wanted to watch you broken and humiliated so I could prove to myself that no one could ever reach me. And now? Now I'm terrified," she admitted. "Because if I let myself care about you, and you leave when you discover I'm not the goddess they've made me into, I don't think I'll survive it." Marcus reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and gently wiped the tears from her face. "I've already seen who you really are, in the mirrors, when all your defenses were down. And I'm still here." "The binding ceremony," she began. "Can wait," Marcus said firmly. "I didn't win you in a contest, Lorelei. I earned the right to court you, to try to win your heart. That's not something that happens in one night." She stared at him in amazement. "You would refuse your right after everything you sacrificed? I would transform it into something better, into a choice you make freely, not because ancient laws compel you." "For the first time since the trials began," Lorelei smiled. Not the polished expression of royal duty, but something genuine and unguarded. "You really are different from any being I've ever met." "Different enough to be worth the risk?" Marcus asked. Instead of answering with words, she stepped closer and placed her hand over his heart, feeling its steady rhythm. "Ask me again tomorrow, and the day after that. Keep asking until I'm ready to answer, not as a princess, but as a woman who's learning what it means to be chosen." Outside their window, the first rays of dawn began to paint the sky in shades of gold and amber, marking the beginning of something entirely new for both their worlds.